The West has always feared independent black leadership because it threatens the systems they rely on to maintain control. But despite their efforts to silence revolutionary voices, a new generation of African leaders is rising. Leaders like Traore, who are not afraid to call out Western hypocrisy and take bold steps toward true African freedom. Do you think Captain Ibrahim Traore is only focused on the people of Burkina Faso? Think again. He is a firm believer in African unity, and his vision extends far beyond the continent, reaching Africans all around the world. His commitment to the global African community includes African Americans, a population of nearly 48 million in the United States. But what exactly did he say about African unity that has unsettled Western leaders? And why have his remarks about the United States and Donald Trump's immigration policies sparked such global discussions? A major shift is happening, and at the center of it stands Captain Ibrahim Traore, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso. As U.S. President Donald Trump moves forward with his plans for mass deportations of African immigrants under the Locking-Riley Act, Traore has issued a powerful message. Africa will no longer tolerate oppression, exploitation, or Western hypocrisy. For centuries, the United States and European powers have extracted Africa's wealth while mistreating and marginalizing black people globally. Now, with one of the largest planned deportations of African immigrants in modern U.S. history, Traore has made it clear, this is not just about immigration. This is about power, economic control, and the ongoing fight for black liberation. His message to Trump, the U.S., and the entire Western world is direct and uncompromising. Africa is no longer a continent to be exploited while its people are cast aside. The West will not be allowed to continue extracting resources from Africa while simultaneously rejecting Africans themselves. The era where Western nations dictated African leadership, controlled its economies, and manipulated its politics is coming to an end. Black people, whether in Africa, the U.S., the Caribbean, or Europe, are waking up, and they are refusing to accept subjugation any longer. Traore is not alone in this movement. A new generation of African leaders is emerging, bold, unapologetic, and fiercely committed to reclaiming Africa's sovereignty. These leaders are rejecting foreign interference, pushing back against economic manipulation, and dismantling the systems that have kept African nations dependent on Western powers. They understand that Africa has the resources, the land, and the workforce to sustain itself without relying on foreign aid or external control. At the same time, Traore has exposed the hypocrisy of Western nations, particularly the United States. For decades, America has positioned itself as a defender of democracy and human rights. Yet its own history is riddled with racial injustice and economic exploitation. Traore's words serve as a reminder that Africa no longer needs lectures from the same nations that have built their wealth on the backs of Africans while denying them dignity and equality. This moment is more than just a political statement. It is a defining chapter in history. Africa is reclaiming its power, and its people, both on the continent and in the diaspora, are realizing the strength they hold. The question now is, will African nations come together to build stronger ties with their brothers and sisters across the globe? Should African leaders take a stand, not just for their citizens at home, but for black people worldwide? African Americans continue to be trapped in a system designed to keep them at a disadvantage. From economic deprivation and mass incarceration to police brutality and systemic discrimination, black communities in the United States have endured decades of government policies that strip them of wealth, limit their opportunities, and criminalize their very existence. The same country that preaches democracy and freedom to the world was built on the forced labor of enslaved Africans and has spent centuries oppressing black citizens. Now, with Donald Trump's return to power, the United States is once again turning against African immigrants, treating them not as people, but as a problem to be erased. Trump's Locking Riley Act is far more than an immigration policy. It is a direct attack on Black and African communities, a calculated strategy to push Africans further into the margins of American society. Under this law, African immigrants are labeled as security threats, despite their undeniable contributions to the American workforce, economy, and culture. The hypocrisy is impossible to ignore. If the U.S. truly values human rights, why does it continue to deny Black Americans the justice and equality they deserve? If it claims to be the land of freedom, why does it overthrow African leaders who refuse to bow to Western interests? And if America is a nation of opportunity, why does it make it so difficult for African immigrants to thrive, while simultaneously exploiting Africa's resources? Before we dive deeper, let us know, are you finding this discussion insightful? If you are, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to our channel for more content about Africa's global impact. Now, let's continue. Trump's aggressive deportation plan comes at a time when Africans in the U.S. are excelling, building businesses, working hard, and making meaningful contributions to society. Instead of acknowledging their efforts, the U.S. government is treating them as disposable. The double standard is blatant. The same Western powers that have spent centuries destabilizing Africa and plundering its wealth are now turning their backs on the very people their policies displaced. This is nothing new. The West has always sought to extract the best from Africa while discarding the rest. For generations, Africa's labor was exploited through the transatlantic slave trade. During colonial rule, its land was stripped of resources to fuel Western economies. Even today, Africa's minerals, oil, and rare earth metals are being plundered, while Western-backed financial systems ensure the continent remains economically suppressed. Now, as the U.S. moves to deport African immigrants, it continues to rob African nations of their wealth, proving once again that its interest in Africa has never been about partnership. It has always been about control. Captain Ibrahim Traore sees through this deception, and he is not staying silent. His message to Trump and the U.S. is clear. You cannot destroy African economies, force Africans to flee their homelands, and then discard them when they arrive on your soil. Africa is no longer willing to be treated as disposable. The world is changing, and the old ways of exploitation will no longer be tolerated. The age of Western deception is coming to an end. At the heart of Captain Ibrahim Traore's message is a powerful call for Black unity, not just within Africa, but across the globe. His appeal for the African diaspora to return home, reclaim their roots, and reconnect with the continent poses one of the greatest challenges to Western dominance. For centuries, the United States and Europe have thrived by keeping Black people divided and disempowered. The transatlantic slave trade shattered African civilizations, while colonization and systemic racism erased African history and identity. Even after slavery, Black communities in the West were deliberately held back through policies designed to suppress their economic power and reinforce white supremacy. But times are changing. Black people around the world, whether in the U.S., the Caribbean, or Europe, are beginning to see the connection between their struggles and the exploitation of Africa. They are realizing that the forces that keep Africa poor are the same forces that have marginalized Black people globally. And that realization is shaking the foundations of Western power, because the moment Black people unite across borders, the system of racial oppression that has sustained Western wealth for centuries begins to unravel. The root of the West's fear of Africa lies in its deep economic dependence on African resources. The United States and France, in particular, have built vast fortunes by plundering the continent's wealth. Gold, uranium, lithium, oil, and countless other minerals essential to modern industries. Western-controlled financial institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank ensure that African economies remain trapped in debt and servitude. Even Africa's banking system is structured to benefit Western interests rather than the people of the continent. If Africa were to break free from these financial chains, the economic dominance of the West would collapse. This is why the US and France work tirelessly to remove African leaders who resist their influence. They install puppet governments that prioritize Western interests over African sovereignty. They fund military interventions disguised as peacekeeping missions, and they push propaganda that portrays Africa as a continent of poverty, instability, and chaos. But Traore refuses to play by their rules. His vision is built on African self-sufficiency, economic independence, and the rejection of Western interference in African affairs. His leadership represents a shift, a new wave of African leaders who refuse to be manipulated, controlled, or bought. And that terrifies the West. History has shown that whenever Black leaders rise to challenge Western dominance, they are met with relentless opposition, including threats, coups, and even assassinations. The pattern is undeniable. Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the Congo, was assassinated in 1961 with CIA involvement. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary leader, was murdered in 1987 in what many suspect was a French-backed plot. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. were both eliminated for daring to challenge white supremacy in the United States. Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and executed in a NATO-led coup in 2011 after advocating for African economic liberation. Traore is fully aware of the history of Western interference in Africa. He understands the fate that has befallen many African leaders who dared to challenge foreign dominance. But unlike those before him, he is not naive. He is prepared. His message to the United States and its allies is clear. If you attempt to eliminate me, Africa will not remain silent. The world is watching. The era where African leaders could be removed in secret, without global outrage, is over. Traore is not just fighting for Burkina Faso. He is standing for all of Africa, and for Black people worldwide. His leadership symbolizes a new generation that refuses to be intimidated, manipulated, or controlled by Western powers. And as Western nations, particularly the United States, continue to push aggressive policies against Africa and its people, the question remains: what should African leaders do to stop Donald Trump from deporting Africans? Should Africa simply accept these actions, or is it time for the continent to unite and push back against the U.S. policy of expelling African immigrants? The truth is, Africa must stand as one, resisting the idea that Western nations have the authority to decide when to take Africans, as they did during the transatlantic slave trade, and when to discard them, as Trump is now planning. What are your thoughts? Should African nations create a strong, unified front against this policy? Should African leaders take decisive action to protect their people across the world? Share your opinion in the comments section below. If you want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay tuned.